having explored all 12 zodiac signs, I thought it would be fun to take a series and see how each zodiac sign or its characteristics show up in a character. To do that, I chose one of my favorite animes, which is Haikyuu, the volleyball sports anime, and also because some of the characteristics of the zodiac signs are so beautifully displayed, it makes it very easy to actually recognize those traits. So if you haven't watched it yet, it's definitely a recommendation. It's a really good anime. Hello and welcome back. If you're new to the channel, my name is Jada. Before we dive into this video, I want to mention a few things. First of all, it could be that I mention a few spoilers, so just want to have you warned in case you haven't watched the whole series yet, or you haven't seen or read the manga, where they already finished the manga but they haven't finished the series yet. So just so you know, there could be some spoilers. The next thing that I want you to keep in mind while listening to this video is, just like with the other archetypes video, like the God videos for example, we usually feel drawn to a specific character, either a specific god or a specific character in a movie, and we are drawn to that character for a very specific reason, because it activates something inside of us. I want you to reflect, especially if you know the series, which character you feel most drawn to, because usually they reveal something about yourself. I noticed that my favorite characters usually had similar traits to them, or they combined traits that I either find really inspiring, I see myself in those traits, or I strive to have that trait. And this obviously doesn't just go for this series like Haikyuu, but any movie that you watch, whatever character emotionally speaks to you, usually reveals something about yourself. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind while watching this video, and maybe whenever you watch another film or movie, whatever, and there is a character that speaks to you. And lastly, this is just my very personal opinion on which character has which zodiacal characteristics to it. So I don't think there is like the right answer to it. It's always a perspective thing, and it could be that you have a totally different take on that, which is fine as well. And if you do, I would love to know, so make sure to tell me in the comments. Oh, and before I forget, I actually watched the series in Japanese with English subtitles, so this is why the pronunciation might sound weird to you if you've watched it in English. Okay, so let's start with Aries. So overall, I feel like the whole show is very much Aries based in the characters, because everybody's like very active, very competitive, wants to be the best, which overall is a very Aries characteristic. So I think like 90% of the characters have that trait inside of them, stronger or less stronger. But the one that stands out the most to me is actually Hinata Shoyo. So Hinata to me is like the personification of an Aries energy. He blindly heads into things without worrying about the consequences. He's very competitive, which is shown with his rivalry with Kageyama. They're like constantly butting heads and constantly trying to outdo each other. But it usually comes from a sense of proving that I am better, but not on an emotional level, rather on a physical level. Unlike with Oikawa, who it is very much about showing that you are good enough, that you are worthy enough, with Hinata it's just about proving your skills and how good you are at what you do. Then he's obviously very energetic and can't sit still, which with Aries is often expressed in a physical desire to move. And if you've watched the series, you know that Hinata is constantly running around. Like when everybody else is already beat, he still keeps going. And even after training session, he's like driving half an hour home on a bicycle. So his energy is like relentless. Then he's obviously very easily inspired, which is shown in the very first scene. So he sees this transmission of the volleyball match, and he sees this very tiny guy being like the star of the show, and it's just this very scene that inspires him, and he doesn't need more motivation than that to start with volleyball, which is a very much Aries trait, energy of being easily inspired and going after what it is that you want. He also displays this Aries ignorance energy, like as I mentioned in the Aries video, their ignorance usually comes from immaturity with little experience, which means they're usually very unbiased. Like he doesn't care that he's technically speaking way too short to be a volleyball player whatsoever, let alone a middle blocker. He's like, this is what I'm gonna do, and he goes all for it. He doesn't care what other people think of him. It's all about the goal for him. It's like, I want to be the best. I want to even be better than my idol. And he follows that no matter what. The next characteristic that we see with Hinata is his very unbased positive outlook. So he believes that it will have a positive outcome no matter what, and this is shown throughout the series. For example, in the beginning when Kageyama asks him to close his eyes so he could make a spike, so he would finally hit the ball, like everybody else would be like, what the heck, no chance I'm gonna do that. But Hinata doesn't think about it twice. He's just like, okay, cool, let's do it. He closes his eyes, he jumps, and he has total faith that he's going to hit the ball because Kageyama is going to set it for him perfectly. And this is this Aries level of optimism where they literally jump into the unknown without fearing the consequences. It is also shown when there is like a boot camp in the Shiratorizawa school, when only pre-selected players are allowed to join there, so it's very exclusive. And some of Hinata's teammates call him out and say, you know what, you should just join, not tell anybody and just go for it. And Hinata, being the character that he is like, oh my god, this is a brilliant idea, this is exactly what I'm going to do. So he joins the boot camp and lines up with the rest of the players until the coach comes up and be like, what the hell are you doing here? You were not invited. However, he's not allowed to join the actual camp, but he is allowed as a ball boy, I think this is what they call it. Like, he needs to collect all the balls that get thrown around and went off course and all that stuff. So he's only allowed to stay to do that. And he's having a conversation with his own coach about, you know, being in this position, not being able to actually play and now having to collect balls. And his coach tells him, you know, this is a really great opportunity and you can actually learn so much from it. So don't take it easily as just collecting balls, but really get the most out of it. Use it to train your other skills that you are weak at. So this is exactly what Hinata does, and this is where you see one of his major jumps in character development, where he matures a lot. And if we look at it from the Aries perspective, he matures from quickly jumping into things without thinking, not worrying about the consequences, to learning to pause, learning to observe, learning to take a moment before taking action. And it's actually this time or this week that his observer skills get developed, which is not necessarily something that Aries has. But because he's constantly collecting the balls, he's constantly watching the other players. And for example, he's really bad at receiving balls. So he watches the other players, like, how do they do this? And he notices the little shifts that they make. How do they perform at their best? Like, what are the micro adjustments that they make? And he adapts those. And throughout the week, you can see how he learns to actually receive the balls better and better. And this is actually a really beautiful example of seeing development in characters. At the end of the day, it's still an Aries energy, but it matured, it learned, it grew its skills and its capabilities. Next, we have the Taurus energy. The Taurus energy, I find, is not that strong represented in the show compared to the Aries energy, but I would probably most assign Daiichi to a Taurus energy, just because he really represents the foundation of the whole team. I find in him those traits of being very stubborn on one side, but also very reliable. He doesn't necessarily need the spotlight. Like, a lot of the show is about who's being the best spiker and who's got the best position and who is the most relevant to the team. And Daiichi never really dives into that dynamic. He is happy and content to do the work that is less popular, basically. So he doesn't stand out with having the strongest spike or having the craziest receive, but about being very solid in his overall performance. Like, it's kind of always the same. He doesn't have a lot of fluctuation in how he performs, which is very Taurian-like, having this consistency to it. Another scene where I see him as the foundation of the team is in the game where he gets knocked out. He gets a ball to the head and he gets unconscious and nobody knows how bad it really is. Can he play again? Does he need to go to a hospital? Like, he's even alive? It's like this intense moment where he gets knocked out. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And it is shown in the rest of the team, like the dynamic shifts. And not just because one of their players gets hit, but because Daichi gets hit. And it isn't until he comes back, even though he can't play, that the team feels in balance again, even though he doesn't actively do something, but his presence gives a calm to the whole team. Another characteristic that I see in him is that of being stubborn like a Taurus. And it is actually most visible the first time that he meets Kuro, the captain of the Nekoma team. So the first time they meet, they're shaking hands and both are squeezing as hard as they can, kind of having a challenge on who gives up first, who can squeeze stronger, who can tolerate more pain, that kind of thing. So on a surface level, it looks very much boys being boys. But if you look closer, the way I see it, it comes from a different perspective from both characters. So with Daichi, it's like the stubbornness of I don't give up. You squeeze as hard as you want, it like I don't care, I'm gonna push through and just to prove a point, which is very Taurian-like. Kuro, on the other hand, from him I see it more from a challenging perspective, proving dominance, which I would assign more to a Scorpion trait. So even though they're doing the same thing, if you look at the whole character, it does feel like it comes from a different energy or perspective. Next we have Gemini, which to me definitely is Nishinoya. He's very social, he's very upbeat, always having a fun time. He has this very youthful and mischievous energy to him, which is very Gemini-like. Also, he easily gets along with everyone. He's not someone who judges people, but has a tendency to include them. He doesn't care if you're the shortest one, he doesn't care if you're the tallest or most impressive one. He treats everybody the way he feels like treating them, and not to prove something. Also, Geminis are known to be very adaptable, very flexible, and while usually it is shown in their mental abilities to adapt easily, Nishinoya displays that in a physical level. Like, he's the libero, so he needs to be the fastest to react from like a ball that comes from the other side. And I think this is very beautiful shown in his character. So even though he needs this ability to perceive what is happening and being able to adjust very, very quickly, even quicker than the others, because he's getting a ball that he doesn't know how and in what form it will come to him and even where. Then another trait that we see with him is he can be very loud, but he can also be very serious. While he is very carefree, he has no issue about becoming serious, down to business, and having a heart-to-heart with someone, like he did with Asahi. Another characteristic that I find interesting is his tendency to be everywhere and nowhere. So he can laugh around and joke around with people, but as soon as he's on the court, he can become laser focused. And I think this is a beautiful example of what a Gemini energy can be like if it gets focused onto something instead of being distracted by 1,000 things around him. Next we have Cancer, which to me would be Sugawara. And why it might not be the most obvious one, but it shows in more subtle ways. Overall, I don't think that Cancer is like the most prominent energy in the show, but it still shows in specific characteristics. For example, with Sugawara, it's like how he's willing to give up his position as setter, actually willingly, for Kageyama, because he knows that Kageyama is better than him, and the well-being of the whole team is more important than his own needs. He also has this side-like approach like a crab, when he makes like sneaky remark to provoke people or to get a certain outcome. So he's not the one that confronts either his opponents or his people very directly. He can say something on the court to his friends that the opponent hears, and he knows that whatever he's saying sets off the opponent, so he does it in a very sneaky way. Or also his sets sometimes can be very sneaky and not as confrontational as, for example, Kageyama's. Also, you see over and over again scenes where he uses laughter to ease up the energy, like the tension, and to make things easier, to create connection, which is also very much Cancer energy. For example, he slaps the teammate on the back and makes a joke and laughs about it just to ease up the tension. Next we have Leo, which to me clearly is Bokuto. And he's like Hinata to me is like such an obvious Leo, it's crazy. He's very boisterous, he thinks he has the best. At the same time, he has a very frail ego, like as soon as he messes up or he doesn't get the attention that he wants, he kind of falls or crumbles down and loses all energy or all confidence. So on one side he likes to yell out how amazing he is and that he is the best. At the same time he very much needs the confirmation. For example, in the tournament that they're playing, I think it's the Nationals, I don't remember quite well, but there are like two halls. They're like the center court where it's like 5 volleyball fields on it, and then there's like a separate room with just one volleyball field on it, and he's in the hall with just the one volleyball field, and he's super disappointed by it, and he's like, oh, you know, the other one would be much cooler, everybody would see me there are a lot more people who could admire me and all that kind of stuff. And his friend, the one who's always dealing with his mood swings, and he says to Bokuto, yeah, you're right, but you know, in the big hall you would have to divide the attention to 4 other courts, while in this one the whole attention is just on you. And you can see how Bokuto lights up immediately and is like, I've got the best spot after all, and he's back on his game and performing his best. And this is kind of seen throughout the series, where he loses his confidence, his teams build it up again, and he's like this amazing superstar again. And the interesting thing is that he's not just show, he really is good. He really is one of the top, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 spikers of his generation, something like that. Another characteristic that we see with him is also a very strong, unbased optimism. There's this one scene. So he's having an emotional moment with Akashi, his best friend, and he's like, oh my god, it's kind of sad. And Akashi's like, are you okay? Are you getting sick or something? Because he's never seen Bokuto so mature. And Bokuto looks at him and is like, what are you talking about? I'm gonna live until I'm 110. And he says it with such confidence, like there's no doubt about it, that he's gonna be 110 and he's gonna be in perfect health. So Bokuto can on one side be a little annoying, but very endearing at the same time. And Leo is known to be very defensive of the people he cares and very nurturing. And this is actually also shown throughout the series, especially when they're having those boot camps where they're meeting with other like volleyball clubs and stuff to have like friendly tournaments. And he teaches the other teams his skills, like he teaches Hinata to do the specific spike, even though he doesn't have to. But because of this Leo energy, it's like you're kind of part of the tribe, at least in this very setting. So I'm going to teach you what I have learned so you can become your best version as well, which is also very much Leo-like, this ability to lead and get the best out of people. And Bokuto also shows maturity, like where throughout the series he's having a very frail ego. It gets mentioned in the manga at the end of it, like he has matured. He doesn't need that attention anymore. He has found the confidence inside of him and has learned that humbleness doesn't mean weakness. So he learns that even, you know, being a little bit outside of the spotlight doesn't make him any less. Next we have Virgo, which to me is very much Tsukishima. The reason for that is that he's very calculated, very detail-oriented, and also very snarky. Now Virgo, by definition, are not necessarily snarky. They can be very gentle, very caring, but he has this sharpness to his character, which I associate to Virgo, because Virgo is very discerning. It's like very yes and no, very black and white. And I find that Tsukishima's snarkiness or meanness to a certain degree is represented in that very sharp line of Virgo. It is also shown in the comments that he makes to piss people off. They are so deliberate and so specific, and it's like very on point. And this too I would associate to the Virgo energy, like that ability to be so precise in what you do, so intentional. And then there's the scene where they're up against Ushijima, which is the only left-hand spiker of the whole series. And the reason this is relevant is because as a left-hand spiker, the ball flies differently. It has a different roll or spin to it, which makes it harder to block if you are not used to it. And since this is the first time they're up against him, they never had practice or the opportunity to practice to block such spikes. So throughout this match, you can see how Tsukishima tries to block Ushijima over and over again, but fails. And it isn't revealed after he finally managed to block him, how he has been perfecting his ability to block Ushijima with every single block. And this is so Virgo-like, like noticing that tiny difference, making a tiny adjustment over and over again until you hit perfection. Oikawa is actually another character where I see the Virgo energy as well, and it is in his tendency for perfectionism, like he overworks him like crazy to become better and better. But with Oikawa, it comes from the perspective of not being good enough, which is kind of one of the shadow sides of a Virgo, constantly improving, constantly doing better, constantly feeling like everyone is better and you're working your ass off and you're still not good enough, despite being incredibly good. And also this tendency of comparing himself to others, like showing the difference between one another. And Tsukishima on the other side doesn't really show it from an insecurity perspective, but rather from an approach perspective, like the way he does things is very meticulously. Next we have Libra. Libra I will probably associate to Oikawa, even though Oikawa is the one character that I find split between 3 zodiac signs, which is Virgo that I mentioned before, Libra and Scorpio, which I'm gonna mention next. But Oikawa in Libra I mostly see in being very handsome, like it is shown over and over again how vain he is, like how much he cares about his looks, how much he gets admired for his look. He's very, very charming, which is also very much a Libra quality. When it comes to the characteristic of fairness and balance, there I definitely don't see Oikawa whatsoever. But I'm gonna be honest, there was no one I really saw that stood out to me, or that I could remember that stood out to me in a Libra way. Being very just, being very fair, making sure that nobody's like that everybody feels included, and you know, everything is fair basically. So if you have a suggestion on who you see that Libra characteristic of being very fair, being very diplomatic and very just, let me know, because I honestly couldn't think of anyone that really stood out to me. Next we have Scorpio. I have actually 3 characters that came to mind when thinking of the Scorpio energy. The first one is Ushijima. He has this very stoic, broody, like introverted energy to him, like nobody dares to approach him because he's so impressive. He has just this aura to him that kind of makes him intimidating, even though when you see his interaction, he's actually not really intimidating, but he has this presence about him that makes him like, I think I better keep my distance from this one. Next we have Oikawa, as I already mentioned. Oikawa displays a few characteristics of Scorpio. One is being very manipulative. The way he talks to his teammates, kind of in an emotionally manipulative way to make sure they perform at their best. The next one is how he holds on to grudges for a very long time. So emotional grudges are very much Scorpio. So he's very pissed about Kageyama, even though technically Kageyama did nothing wrong. It's just that Oikawa has put in so much effort to become this incredible setter that he is, and then Kageyama comes along and it's just a natural edit. He doesn't have to put in a lot of effort, which isn't sure you see how much effort Kageyama puts in becoming good, but he does have a natural talent to it. This is kind of the grudge that Oikawa holds against Kageyama for actually no reason. Next, he has this self-destructive behavior. He demands a lot from himself and he doesn't care if his body suffers as a consequence. And it's actually also shown in his obsessiveness. The way you see him watch a match over and over again, to analyze it, to dive into it, is to me again a combination of Virgo being very analytical and obsessive, being very Scorpio-like, like he watches the whole night through. Next we have Kuro, which to me is probably the most Scorpio energy of the 3, because he has a very mischievous energy to it, but it's not the same mischievousness as with Nishinoya. It is a more darker, manipulative kind of thing, even though Kuro itself is never he never does it in a negative or harmful way. I guess because his mischievousness primarily shows up in the verbal banter that he's having with others, like kind of setting people off in a playful way, and you know, but at the same time manipulating them to perform their best selves. The way he manipulates Tsukishima in joining their party to teach him how to block properly and all that kind of stuff. So he's very deliberate with his manipulation, and he does it very intentional. At the same time, he's very loyal to the one he cares, which is also shown in those boot camps. The way he takes care of Tsukishima, shows him tricks to improve his blocks and that kind of stuff, how he incorporates Hinata and all those little details. And there is actually a scene where someone says to him, "Oh, you're actually nice," and he's like, "What the hell, of course I'm nice." So I think this very scene shows how on one side Kuro can come off as an asshole, but on the other side he's actually one of the most genuine people of the show. Next we have Sagittarius, which to me is very much Tanaka. On one side he has this very fire energy of being very boisterous, being very outgoing, being very energetic. On the other side he's also the one that is shown over and over again to be a little clumsy, to be a little tactless, or being a little awkward. Like Sagittarius can have an awkward energy to it in social settings, even though they're very honest and they're very genuine, which is one of the beautiful traits of a Sagittarius. But they kind of have a tendency to make things awkward by saying something that is out of tact. For example, there is this one scene where he meets the new manager, which is Kyoko, this beautiful girl that everybody falls in love with because she's so beautiful. And he drops to his knees and proposes to her and be like, "Oh, please marry me." And she's just like, "Okay, whatever," and just walks past him. And it's that energy that is so Sagittarius-like when it comes to Tanaka, being like, going for it without pausing to think or without worrying about the consequences. And it doesn't necessarily come like with an Aries energy where it's about, I don't care about the consequences, but more like he's so genuine about what he's feeling right now that he wants to express it, which is also shown when he meets an old friend from childhood. They meet again at this tournament after a very long time where they haven't seen each other, and they kind of start interacting, and he still sees her as the little girl when they played around when they were very young, and kind of misses that she's kind of hinting at him and showing that she's interested. So he's totally oblivious to the fact. Next we have Capricorn, which to me is definitely Kageyama, which is especially shown in the first episode where he gets called the king of the court because he's such a ruthless player with his opponents, but even with his own teammates. So he sees everyone who isn't as good as him as below him, and he has no scruples to walk over people or use people to his advantage in order to achieve his goal. The Capricorn energy also shows up in how ambitious he is. So he wants to be a professional volleyball player, and he's willing to do literally anything for it. As I mentioned, even sacrifice his own team members. He literally doesn't care what they think about him as long as the goal is accomplished. And this is the biggest character development that you see throughout the series with Kageyama, from this very selfish asshole behavior to becoming a more and more mature leader. So Capricorn are known to be the leader of society, to incorporate positions of leadership, and he slowly develops the healthy manifestation of that. On one side he becomes humbler, he realizes that it is also his responsibility to make the other player play their best. Being the setter, he's the one that has the most influence on how well a spiker can spike, basically. It shows when he approaches Oikawa and asking him for advice, because Oikawa literally is still the best at what he does, especially in terms of being the leader, being the captain of the team, the way he leads the team. And Kageyama always struggled to give feedback to his teammates or to request something from his teammates. Whenever he would set a ball in a very specific way and the spiker wouldn't get it, Kageyama was always like, "I know you can do it, get your shit together and get that ball." And he kind of always clashed with his teammates because of that. And Oikawa kind of explains to him, it's not about you doing your best, it's about getting the best out of the players. So your role as the setter is not to show how amazing you are and how perfect you can set, but it's setting in a way that the spiker can perform its best. And it's those kind of interaction that lets him mature more and more. Next, we have Aquarius. Aquarius is probably also not the energy that I would see strongest in the whole series, but the one character I would attribute to it is Kenma. On one side is shown with him insisting on being called on first name basis and not last name as is customary in Japanese culture. So it's like, I don't really like these formalities, they don't make no sense, just call me by my first name. Then he is the tech guy, he's constantly playing video games, and even the way of thinking to him has like this Aquarius-like energy where he does things not according to the norm. Another character that comes to mind when thinking of Aquarius would actually be from the Shiratorizawa team, Tendo. I think it was Tendo, I don't remember, it was Tendo or Tendu, the one with the red hair. And especially in his eccentric behavior, like he totally defies the norm in how he behaves, he's totally inappropriate, and he literally doesn't care about this. So this is a very Aquarius energy of standing out from the masses and not caring about what others think, but being your individualistic self. On the other side, he also actually shows Taurus traits on a second glance. On one side, it's a stubbornness. For example, he never quit playing volleyball, even though everybody kind of told him to leave and he's too weird and all that kind of stuff, but he kept playing just to prove a point. Also later on at the end of the manga, it is said that he becomes a chocolatier in Paris. And since food is very much attributed to Taurus, so this is also one of the reasons I would kind of give him, at least to a degree, a Taurus energy. Lastly, we have Pisces. Pisces was also kind of difficult to find. I more found it in specific traits rather than in a whole character. One would be Iwaizumi, and that might sound very counterintuitive. It's in the little ways on how he takes care of Oikawa, for example, when he has been training for who knows how long, and it's the last one on the court, and Iwaizumi comes in and be like, listen, enough is enough, let's go. Or when Oikawa is still rewatching games that he has lost obsessively, and Iwaizumi is like, listen, just it's enough. So this very caring nature that he has in very rare moments, because Iwaizumi overall is one that seems like anger prone, like he constantly gets annoyed, especially with Oikawa. He gets very triggered by him. So that's not very much, that's not actually very Pisces-like. And to be honest, I couldn't quite decide where I would put Iwaizumi's outburst of anger. I was thinking of Aries, but I don't know, for some reason I couldn't quite pinpoint it. So if you have an idea on that, I would actually love to know. Another reason I attribute Iwaizumi to Pisces is because in the manga, when they have like the spin-off, when they're all grown up, Iwaizumi becomes the physiotherapist of the national Japanese volleyball team. And any caretaking job like doctors, physiotherapists, nursing is very much a Pisces energy. There's another character that I would actually associate to the Pisces energy, or rather a very specific trait of that character. And it's actually Kenma's ability to imagine being in some sort of a game. So I think it was in the last movie, the 5th movie, where he is shown how he trains and exercises for volleyball, and he actually hates it. He hates running, he hates moving a lot. All he wants to do is being locked up in his room and play his games. And he imagined himself like in this video game like scenario where he's running, and then he gets like he runs through, I don't even know how to call it. He runs through some object that gives him a new boost and that kind of thing. And he sees like characters from his game that run along or swim alongside him. So this ability to really imagine this different world while working out is a very Pisces trait. Then the last character I would attribute to the Pisces energy, which is maybe the most obvious one, is Yamaguchi. Primarily for his inability to set boundaries, especially with Tsukishima. In the beginning, he just follows Tsukishima and does whatever he does. So if Tsukishima bullies someone, he just plays along. So he doesn't really have a sense of self. Only later on through the series, where his own character develops, he finally stands up for himself and he confronts Tsukishima for being a coward, which for someone with a Pisces energy can be a very hard thing to do. As mentioned, they can have a very hard time to set up boundaries for themselves. They feel the other person so strongly they sometimes don't realize where they start or where they end and someone else start. Confronting someone and being rejected emotionally or being the reason to upset that other person is a very real fear, or can be a very real fear to a Pisces energy. So this is it for this video. This was my take on how I see the zodiac energy displayed in the Haikyuu characters. I would love to hear your opinion on this, some additional insight that you had, something that I didn't think of, like what zodiacal trait did you see in what character, and did you even learn something from this about yourself? This would be like really cool. I would love to know. As mentioned, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, this is it for this video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.